Chloe, can you put yourself on mute?
So I've got to go back into here.
And Sam, should I see that here? It'll come
Do
up.
I? So this is on the slide deck now.
Here we go. We're live. I can only see a black slide. Chloe, can you see anything else?
I can only see you two.
Can you see us now, Chloe?
Yeah, I can see you and Tony. I can't see the slide deck.
It's coming up.
Super.
Super.
Great.
I can't.
Yeah, we're good.
I can't see anything. Sam, I can't see anything on my screen. Got it.
So if somebody wants to count us down when we're at the
We're alive. We're live now, Tony.
Well,
so
that's good. Well,
let's kick it off.
Well, bit of a welcome, I guess. Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning into our Facebook live feed. And I'm Tony.
And I'm Paula.
Welcome.
And thank you for joining us in what we could only describe as extraordinary times. The rain is just starting here in Sydney, so excuse a little bit of the background noise. We are dealing with two screens in front of us. I'm going to take charge of answering some of the questions coming through. Tony and I are going to share the slide deck. But thanks for tuning in, because today we're going to cover some important tips for leaders and their teams in responding to the three questions that we put forward that were posted on social media. You would have received those if you're attending today. Thank you so much for the quality of responses. We have been overawed. Yeah, and we've actually analysed them like we would a analytical piece of research that we would in our consultancy practice, and we really want to feed back the responses because we feel like we've got a great sense of sentiment out there in the market. In addition to that, we're going to talk today about how to set your team up inside a huddle, how to do an effective team check-in. It's something that we practice every day in our business and something that we encourage all of the teams that we work with all around Australia to do every single day. How to help your team plan their day. And that might sound obvious, but when you're working remotely and there's so much news coming your way, sometimes it's a little bit overwhelming and we need to come back to basics. So we're going to talk a little bit more about coming back to basics. How to coach your team to make an effective request. So if you're the kind of leader that is normally focused on doing the work instead of coaching the work, we're going to take a little bit of a step change today and encourage you to start asking better questions of your team in order to have them be able to take more responsibility for the commitments they make. So how to secure a reliable commitment is equally important there. We're also going to do a little conversation on how to stay in a good mood. And one of the key things that we've learned from all of you out there is that uncertainty is possibly the biggest challenge that's live on our Facebook page at the moment. So thanks for tuning in. We're going to have time for questions on the way through. I'm going to make sure I pick those up. Over to you, Tony.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to interact with us via your chat. And what we're going to do is your responses, we'll try and blend them in into a conversation along the way. The whole reason why we've put this together is that, you know, Australia, like many other parts of the world, are starting to go into what we're calling lockdown, and teams are working from home. So we want to be helpful and useful for you to really set your teams up well in this unusual environment of working from home, and you know what, maybe for an extended period of time. So, okay, are we ready to launch into this, Paul?
We are.
Okay, let's go. So we've been reading a book called The Invention of Yesterday by a really interesting author called Taman Ansari. What we've found about this book, he gives a beautiful articulation of a long, long history of us human beings. And what it does, it gives some sort of perspective about where we are in these times. So tune into this book, buy it on Kindle. It's available, it's accessible, and it's a damn good read. We'd encourage you to read that. Again, to give you a position on where we are in these times. Okay.
Great. So our promise today is at the end of this workshop, you're going to have a sense about how to navigate uncertainty and anxiety. And we're going to dig into a little quote from Winston Churchill in a while, something that inspired us. And we're going to talk about how we create our world as leaders in the language that we use to describe what's happening for us. The language and the way that we describe that creates a mood for us, and then it creates a kind of way that we show up as a leader. So if we're feeling anxious, we're showing up agitated. If we're feeling pessimistic, then we show up down. But we have the power to change the story that we're in about what's happening. We can't change what's happening out there, but we can change our response to it. And it's going to be an important part of our conversation if we're going to be able to navigate this uncertainty. Tony will dig into that in a moment.
Yeah, but you know what I'm listening to, Paula, I'm sure we all are, you know, many stories and experiences of how people are dealing and coping with life in this time. And we want to dig a little bit into that for the sake of, you know, understanding that intrinsic connection between the way we language what's happening for us now and the mood that generates. So we've got that next.
In addition to that, we're going to share some useful tips and insights on how to be more effective as a leader and understand how to mobilize your team at the beginning of each day. So that's our promise today. Let's jump in.
Okay. So here's this quote by good old Winston Churchill, and it's about a pessimist. A pessimism sees the difficulty in every opportunity. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty. And I tell you what, there's many difficulties and challenges that we face at the moment. So we want to dig a little bit into that mood of what constitutes being a pessimist or pessimism, and what constitutes optimism, and how we can actually cultivate that in our work as leaders.
Fantastic. So, Tony, I just noticed a few people tuning in. Hello, Chris Jordan. It's good to see you back.
G'day, Chris.
Hi, Emily. Hi, Tyler. Hi, Chris. And I also saw Laura there before. So thank you to those of you that have worked with us in our face-to-face environment. Obviously, we're making a major migration. And it's no accident that we were talking about Winston Churchill, because I saw a comment on news the other day about this possibly being the hardest time that we've faced as a nation since 1932. And day by day, it's revealing that we don't know. We have a sense of not knowing what's ahead of us. And it's something that we're grappling with as leaders, certainly as teams. Clearly, Tony and I are not practicing social distancing. For those of you out there that don't know, we work together. We're also married. Our two career paths crossed and fate met us. However,
that's a whole other story.
We are practicing social distancing in the main, by really just being here at our small office and home, and that is it. We really advocate for everyone out there to be following the best practice procedures and guidelines presented by our government. But let's just tune in with what you shared and what we're hearing in response to our 3 questions, because these are quite profound, these responses. If you could go.
Yeah, and just before we do that, thanks so much for interacting with us for the 6 questions that we put up. We were blown away by some of the answers and responses that you gave us. So Paula's going to work through a summary of what we found.
So here's what we're hearing. The challenges you're facing as a leader was one of the first questions we asked. And uncertainty, anxiety, and fear have certainly shaped the first part of our sharing with you today. Not being able to work face-to-face. So we heard from a number of people from the medical professions, disability profession, frontline workers that, you know, some of them can't do their job at all. People working in mines, they can't actually go to site and do some of the things that they've been typically doing in the course of their jobs. Keeping people focused. How do you keep a team that is being bombarded by new information day in, day out, focused, planning for the unknown, and the unknown becomes the unknown the next day and the unknown the next day. We're in a completely new time. We're calling it a new era, a new epoch, something that's changing our history as we're living through it.
Yeah.
And in that, trying to keep morale high.
Keeping people focused is a challenge for any leader. I don't think even how good you are, it's a really difficult time to keep your team focused. Okay,
the next question was, what is your team worried about or complaining about during this disrupted time? So an uncertain future, it stands to reason. We don't know what's ahead of us. Losing jobs and losing work. So this wasn't just losing our job, but some of you work part-time, some of you work paid for the hour. And so that came through very strongly. Not being able to do the normal job that you would normally do because of the restrictions, feelings of anxiety and unsafety, and a lack of income or a prediction or anticipating diminishing income over time. And the third question, Tony.
I'll bring that up now.
I know, let's keep going. Yep. How are you keeping your team focused and working together during this challenging time? So daily check-ins and conversations. And for those of you that are tuned in, we understand you're already doing this. We would like to add to your pool of meaning by throwing a few extra tips out there. But one of those tips is we've started to break our days down into more than one check-in. Because as the news is being delivered via social media, however it's being delivered into your team, sentiment is affected during the day. So we've started to do check-ins every couple of hours just to make sure everyone's buoyant and on track, and it's seeming to have a big difference. Constant communications, congratulations to you out there that are doing that. Encouragement, positivity. There are a lot of leaders that wrote to us and said, we're just constantly in the mood of encouragement. So that's fantastic. Focus shifting to client needs over ours. And you beautiful people out there that are at the front line, honestly, my heart went out to you the way that you described how you were taking care of your clients and how sentiment was so important to you, and that kind of helped you not wallow and not kind of stew on your own problems because your clients' problems are bigger. So thank you for just being you. And finally, involving the team more in decision making. So that was really interesting. Dispersing decisions, having the team make decisions, letting the team make decisions about their own health and well-being. So thank you for those responses. What you've shared with us has completely shaped this deck. So let's get into it, Tony.
Well, I'm a bit interested to get some comments before we jump in. Anything there, Paul? Or
mostly just hi. So shout out to Luke, to Harry. Welcome aboard. There's a lot of people that have joined and just tuning in to say hi. But if you have any questions, could you please pop them in the chat? And I've got it here. I'm going to respond. Are you working from your home or office? Is something we'd love to know. Yeah. Are you doing what Tony are doing, like a form of social distancing, or are you at home in an isolated situation? What's going on for you? We'll share back some of that information so you've got a sense of who's tuning into the conversation.
Okay, I want to shift the beat a little bit, and if you would like to just sit back in your chairs and, shift your feet a little bit, get comfortable. I want to share a bit of a story, really. It's a narrative. And in my attempt, or our attempt, to get you situated right here so that you become present and in a way reflective. It's really interesting here in Australia, what we call the Western world with our Western ways and our middle classness in some form. For the last 70 years, since the end of the Second World War, we've been in relative comfort, albeit there's been many things that have been sweeping our planet, like Mars and SARS and global financial meltdowns, a decade ago, and the Asian meltdown that happened, and many other things that have been disrupted or disrupting at a global level and a local level and even a national level. But we've always quickly recovered to a sense of stability. There's been plenty of jobs and work in Australia. We have free healthcare and free education. There's a lot that we take for granted. In fact, in our daily busyness of work and kids and family and play and taking care of ourselves and others, we often don't see what it is that's being revealed to us now. And that is a different sense of ourself through this thing that's sweeping the planet called the virus, COVID-19, that none of us anticipated. In early December, when it was first recognized as a potential threat, I'm sure that our ears pricked up, but we didn't really have a sense of the magnitude of this thing. And without being alarmist in any way, it is sweeping the country. We're all of a sudden hearing stories factually about even India locking down 1.3 billion people. I mean, imagine that. UK are locked down for 3 weeks. New Zealand are locked down. There's a strong likelihood that we in Australia could be locked down too. But what that's saying is that it's disrupting us. There's a disruption that's interfering with how life we think should be. And so it's creating moods of, I'm just going to go back here, of uncertainty and a degree of complexity. It's making life harder to live because we can't control or don't have the control that we once had, and it's difficult to predict what's even going to happen tomorrow. So all those expectations in our recurrent thinking, our rational analytical way that we think, doesn't seem to be working anymore for us, particularly now. And it's creating a sense of panic and grief. What's happening with our superannuation? What's happening with my job? In 3 weeks' time, where are we going to be? How are we going to manage the kids who, if the school closes? So it's complex, it's stressful, it's frustrating. We can feel a whole range of myriad of moods. Something like resentment and frustration at what's going on, and perhaps even at the leadership of this country, when we know that people are doing their best with what they can in these very, very difficult times of challenge. There's even disillusionment that's arising in our community around, gee whiz, what do we stand to lose out of this? And what's at the other side? What's at the end of this? And so it's throwing up a sense of, in our workplaces, in our families, a sense of disconnection. And, you know, as people, as human beings, we're all connected in some way, even globally, to what's going on. But how do we, as leaders in these times, when things seem so broken and fragmented in a way, keep our teams together, you know, keep ourselves relevant in these times? We think that it's a really good question to live in. And this is why that we thought that this kind of conversation, a longer conversation, would be really useful. And we'd really invite you to engage through our chat and engage with us through other ways to keep in this conversation, because we're right on the edge of this and we want to be relevant for you, to be relevant for your teams, your family, and the community that you live in. So in this time of unsettlement, can we accept that it is unsettling times? Can we accept that we don't have the control, or we don't even have the capacity to predict the way we once did, to feel that comfort, that safety? Perhaps for many of us that's not available at the moment, but can we accept that and be in the drift and flow of whatever happens next, and the new piece of information that drifts out of government, a declaration to lock down or a declaration to close something else out? So be with us on this journey, be with yourself, be with your families, be with your teams in a way that produces a sense of intimacy with intent and care and compassion for those who perhaps aren't as fortunate as what we are.
I think,
Thoughts, Paula?
yeah, I do have some thoughts. And I also just want to acknowledge, we've got a third people, a third of people working at home, a third of people from their home office. So there's not a change for you guys, and a third of people working home office. So it is interesting, but you know what I want to share with our audience out there is, I think there's a little part of us that's just waiting for things to go back to normal.
Yeah, I agree.
And my assessment is that maybe it's not going to. Maybe this is going to present a new way of living on the planet, and we are in the drift at the moment, and we don't know if we're going back to normal. And I just think that that is the big difference of the last 70 years. Something changes and we know it's going to go back to normal. This is big.
Yeah.
This is an interesting time. And what we want to talk about next is, how do we navigate those moods when we feel like we're drifting into pessimism, or we feel like we're drifting into grief, or if we feel like there's no hope. And what we want to talk about, if you want to go to the next slide.
I've got something else I want to share before we do that.
Jump in.
But Paula, picking up on that, I think it's a really important distinction to reflect on, is that we stand on the shoulder of a time that is a reconfiguring moment, that we don't know what's going to happen, but we know it's going to be different from here on in. So can we all accept that? And let's have a bit of a look about that beautiful distinction between language and moods, our narratives, and how we can shape our own reality rather than have it invented for us. Okay. What we want to do here is we want to look at this notion that we create our worlds in language. So the way that we're in conversation with ourselves and others actually produces a mood, produces a sense of our perception and reality. And we want to look at this sense of pessimism and optimism as a variant between the two, to get the different tone and the moods between these two language constructs. So the world of pessimism. Paula, do you want to do this? You do this one and I'll do the next one. Okay.
You know, I think I had a bit of a breakdown this week, because I think I was expecting that things would go back to normal. And then I realized that possibly I was falling into a trap, and that maybe the world's going to be different, and that I could accidentally be down the pessimist trail. So are you more of a pessimist, or are you more of an optimist out there?
Question.
I'm going to keep an eye on my chat. But what I'd like to share with you is that we create our world in language. We listen to the news, we make a judgment of what's happening, and then straight away we're thrown into an emotion. And just think about the last lot of news you saw. I bet you that something negative was there, and straight away something was provoked for you. Now, we do it all the time. We do it in our living. We do it in the way that we lead. However, what we want to do is reveal for you the world a pessimist creates. This world, this is hopeless. In language, we could say, this is hopeless. It's going to ruin all my plans. I don't know how I'll cope. And automatically, as soon as we're thinking that, bang, moods. I'm scared. I'm fearful. I'm resentful. I'm anxious. I'm uncertain. We wanted to reveal this because straight away, as soon as you're showing up to your team in the morning, if you're a leader, even if you're a team member, you're bound to be agitated, distracted, maybe even impatient or aggressive. But this all happens like snap. Now, some of the time we don't realize as a leader that we have a choice in this. We don't realize as a team member that this is a choice that we make. But something that would be helpful for you is to start to see the automatic decisions you make or the automatic responses and reactions you have to your data stream coming in. Now, you can either adjust the data stream or you can start to adjust your relationship with the data. We say the second way is far more powerful for you as a leader, adjusting the story that you're telling yourself. Because if we could flip to the optimist, Tony.
Well, I think there's a question to put in the chat. Have a think about this. If you identify yourself as a pessimist, how is this mood serving you in this moment? Leading teams, your family. So have a think about that. Throw it up in the chat. And we're going to go to the world of an optimist. Now, dare I say, this is my preferred way of being. I like to practice being in this. But have a listen to this language as opposed to the language of the pessimist that we've just come from. So we can say to ourselves is that, well, this is an unprecedented time and this is an unprecedented experience for myself. But you know what? We're going to be okay. I will cope. And there are opportunities here. And we begin to look for opportunities in that. Now, what that does, it throws up a mood of, I have hope. I'm open. I feel acceptance, even though I don't have to like it. Even though around me, I've got no control, but I don't have to like it. I still feel an openness to that and an acceptance. I'm motivated and I'm eager to try different things out. So in other words, I engage myself as a learner and look for those learning opportunities. What this throws up, P, is that my body is more upright and it's open, it's flexible, agile, and I'm able to quickly adapt to any given situation. So in other words, I become the navigator in this mood. So interesting what, anything come up in the chat at all?
And Tanya, thank you so much for your responses here. And I think Tanya is speaking for all leaders who sometimes have to engage or lead people who are feeling hopeless. What do you do as a leader if you're engaging with a team who are presenting with what looks like hopeless? And so one of the things,
Good
Tanya,
question.
I think it's for everybody, it's for us. You know, we work with leaders all of the time, but we all encounter these people that we must work with. So the first is for you as a leader to start to inquire about the quality of the narrative that your people are with. You know, what's the story that they're telling themselves? And this is something you need to do as a leader as well, because we're in charge of the story we're interpreting about what's going on. I'm not being Pollyanna and saying just switch it off. I'm just saying sometimes it's good for people to begin to converse about what they're telling themselves in their head about what's coming in as the data stream. And then you can ask some delicate questions as a leader to begin to reverse that conclusion that they've made, or just create a space for them to try on a new possibility. You know, is that the only way to look at it? Is that the absolute truth? Could there be another way to look at it? You know, how does this way of thinking about it really serve you in this moment? And if you could adopt just a slight shift in that, could you open up just a possibility for you to make a shift? Because a small shift is enough. So I think that's also something that's important at this time is the mood of compassion. We don't know what people are going through. I just had a message from someone who's been with someone that's tested positive today. So I don't know what's happening in their world. And so it's steady as she goes as a leader. We can't expect people to go from pessimism to optimism straight away. But what we can do is ask them some questions that start to open out the tiniest of possibilities, just a little light, and help steer them every day or every conversation just a little bit further down so that they stay. We're going to call it with radical hope, you know, hope against what looks to be quite a bleak time. I'm hoping, Tanya, that helps answer your question there.
There is another notion too. There's many moods between a pessimist and an optimist. But I do want to make one comment, Paula, about keeping open. Usually when something goes wrong or we're out of control and we want to predict and we can't, it seems to be beyond us, is that there's a notion that we want to jump and react, control and over design something. And I've just noted, I think it was Jane made a comment about, oh God, all these new policies and procedures.
It's Emily.
Was it Emily? Yeah, sorry, Emily. Maybe this is a time when we don't over-design. You know, over-designing locks us down in a way and produces a mood of anxiety. Maybe this is a time of going, hey, as long as we're in conversation, let's anticipate what's going on. Let's take it day by day. Let's check in on our commitments and our workflow. And let's really be in this together as a team. And I think that might be a good transition, Paula, into our 6 questions of how do we really gear our team and keep our teams together in these times. And we've developed up 6 points that may be very helpful. Many of you may be doing some of these now, but it might be just a reminder. But for some of you, this might be new and it could be very, very helpful for you.
Yeah. So just Tanya's written back and just shared one other comment on the stream, and I don't want to harp on to Tanya the whole time, but Tanya, it's a great question. Because Tanya works in healthcare, I feel actually really emotional sharing this. When Tanya says we will be okay, it's not believable. And what I'm going to post for you now is an article on something called the Stockdale paradox. And Tanya, it's a pretty edgy article. It comes out of someone that survived a POW camp. And what he noticed was the survivors of the POW camp had this capacity to accept the brutal reality of what's going on and how bleak and dark it could be, and at the same time live with optimism. I'm going to post that directly to you, and if anyone else wants it, I'll ask Chloe to repost it to you via the chat stream. But I think that's what we're being asked to do, to accept the brutal reality of not knowing, of how bleak this could be, that it's changed our lives forever, and yet in that acceptance we can move on. It's when we're resisting and throwing up fear and using that to oppose what's going on that we shut that possibility down. What we're talking about might usually take us a whole day of conversation to get to. It's a pretty radical concept. I'm going to pop it up there for you, Tanya, and I really hope it helps you because I think we're being called to accept what we don't like. And that is what we define as acceptance. You don't have to like what's going on, but if we stop being in the mood of acceptance, we can't move forward. And
even that notion of having an expectation about what's going to happen. For example, President Trump saying that this is going to be cleared up and done and dusted by Easter. Very difficult to have that expectation because we just simply don't know. So again, be careful of the expectations you have. And what Stockdale recognised, that Paula's going to send you the link to, is that those people who had a very solid expectation about how things were going to be, they didn't go so well against those people who had that, well, let's wait and see and let's accept the absolute brutal reality of what's happening now. Okay, that's an interesting read for you. We trust that's going to be helpful for you. So, Paula, you ready to dance
I am.
through
I'm sorry,
these
I just got sidetracked with Tanya, but that's what this is about. We don't want to be here having a conversation with ourselves. Thank you for tuning in and sharing your story.
And certainly invite other people too to interact with us. And again, like Tanya, will interact with you as much as we can do. Okay, so we're at just before the top of the hour. We got 30 to go.
Perfect.
How are you going at the moment? Just a quick check-in with you. You're making notes. Make any adjustments in your seat to get yourself comfortable for the next 30 minutes. Again, we'd love for you to engage with us through chat. Okay, so Paula, you're up first.
I am. So first of all, we're going to talk about a huddle. Now, love to hear about those of you that do a daily huddle. Please let me know in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it. I can do 2 things at once, I think. But if you don't do a daily huddle, it is a practice that we both advocate and we do it. We do it every single day without fail. Ours starts at 8:30. But what it's about is setting your team up very powerfully to focus for the day ahead, to make requests and offers of each other, to declare what each team member is taking care of in the day, and for you as the leader to tune in and to listen for how you can be most helpful to set them up for success. So ideally you start on time and finish on time. It's not meant to be a lazy long hour. In these days though, it could go a little longer, but generally speaking, half an hour is a good gig. And flag any likely disruptions. So we are in an era right now of disruption. We're right in it, okay? We talk about it, but we're in it. If there are likely disruptions, you can talk about those at your 8:30 meeting. And at this point in time, we're also advocating, although it's not on the slide, reconvene at 12 o'clock. Make sure everyone's on track. check in to make sure there are no speed bumps. The other thing is it can be kind of lonely working on Zoom. You can look at each other all you like. Sometimes a one-on-one telephone call or check-in between your morning huddle and what comes next can be a really good practice for a leader. So that's it. Over to you, Tony, for the second one.
Okay. So have a think about, love to hear in the chat about whether you are in huddles at the moment, what's working for the huddles. And if not, do you see this as something that could be valuable for you to do a check-in every morning? Okay. Speaking of check-ins, so part of your huddle, what we do is we do a check-in. Now, a check-in is when we usually involves asking questions to each team member. We've listed 3 questions here, but I want to not so much go into the questions, but rather the importance of checking in. Because we're blending now home and work, particularly if those team members are working from home, we want to have a sense as a leader about where they're at, what's going on in their world. And it can really help to normalize and settle the team down when we're actually in tune with each other. And this is the notion of, or the practice of checking in. A couple of questions here that we often use, and if you follow us on social media, you might see us doing a check-in from time to time. Why? Because we place a lot of importance on this. How would you describe your mood this morning? What that does, it helps people situate themselves in the moment. It brings people back. There's a lot going on for people, particularly kids and partners and family, parents, so it's about pulling in all your thoughts into that moment to help people get settled into their day. Second question there that we've got is, what do you want to achieve through the day? So again, tuning them into what's ahead of them. And then the last question is, Paula mentioned this before, is that what might get in the way of you achieving this? And, anything could come up. Well, we've got to get down to shops, or I've got to do this at 2 o'clock. That's good to declare right there and then. So planning can take place from there. Okay, so let's move on to the... Just
before we do, thank you, Kat. So I can see that Kat does a team huddle. I'm guessing that
well done, Kat.
Mark does that too. Mark, hopefully you found yourself on the Facebook platform. That's very exciting. We know we have some new Facebook friends online, so welcome to the Facebook world. So let's move into the third one now.
Sure.
Look, I'm completely passionate about helping people succeed in their day. I love planning.
It goes beyond passion, Paul.
It really does. I love planning, but I actually don't mind a good interruption because it helps us learn. And one of the things that we're being asked to do as leaders right now is become great learners.
Yep.
Now, what's tricky about that is that generally speaking, we are experts or masters in our domain, and we have just been completely thrown out of our domain. So we are being asked to rethink our relationship with learning. Today, I will confess, we spent 4 hours trying to learn how to run dual platforms on Facebook Live and Zoom and do it.
You would not understand.
We messed up. Boy. We accidentally live streamed. We giggled our way through the whole thing. But this is all about the mood that you bring as a learner. You're not supposed to get it perfect. This is not supposed to be perfect. And we don't want to be perfect. In fact, the failure area is the learning area. That's where you want to fall down and be able to go, what can we learn from this to move on? So in your helping your team plan their day, listen to the workflow, because what you'll be listening for ideally are bottlenecks. And that's your job, is to listen for, if that 12 o'clock finish doesn't happen in time for someone else to pick it up, then we're going to be in a little bit of a pickle. It's a very technical word, a pickle. So you're listening. Right? That's right. You're listening for bottlenecks. You probably have pickles out there too. Now, identify urgent versus important tasks. If you end up with a long list after a huddle, it can be very overwhelming it all feels fine in the huddle, and then you go to your desk for the day ahead and there's 15 things. What can be really helpful is to say, hey, between now and lunchtime, what are the top 3 things you're going to focus on doing, and how can I be helpful? And then you might do it again after lunchtime. But really separating out urgent versus important is going to be helpful for people because of the overwhelm they're likely to be in at the moment. It can be helpful to collectively decide on what's prioritized. And what I mean by that is, maybe if you know yourself to be a directive leader, perhaps there's a new way you can do it to allow other people to have a voice in how your team prioritizes. So consider that a new opportunity. Obviously, we've talked about barriers and disruptions, but have your team self-identify what might get in the way. And in these days, something's going to get in the way probably every day, even if it's technology. For example, today we were going to do Facebook Live, and we understand that the network was slow. So we had a concern as to the quality of experience you would have. We still press go, but we're going to own up to it and say, hey, this might be a disruption. Then, of course, it's about inviting flexibility for the day ahead, especially in the current context. Something that we advocate for, and although we are not getting paid to sponsor Monday.com, is a commitment register. We write down everything we're taking care of as a team. And the reason is sometimes I need to know what Chloe's doing or what Sam's doing or what Tony's doing. And I don't need a conversation. I just want to look at what's going on in the workflow. And that is something that we can collectively put together as a list of things that we're up to, who's doing it, and by when it's going to be complete, as well as any other attachments, so that we've got real-time visibility with each other. So if you haven't established a common platform, we love Google Drive, we love Monday.com. If you want to know more about that, we could certainly set up some learning, but we become a lean, mean operating machine when we've got that right.
And Paula, just a little note on that too, that commitment register is shared with everybody. Everybody sees and can contribute into that commitment register.
Yeah. So we've talked about encouraging requests and offers throughout the day. Please do it more, be in more conversation. And at the end of the day, please encourage all of your team members to take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to get ready for tomorrow, because then you've got your beautiful cycle of coming into your huddle and everyone's ready to talk, and then they're ready to move again. They wrap up their day ready for the next day. Yeah. So this may be done already by you, but it's about, in this time, establishing a pattern, because I think people need a bit of a routine because everything's just been flung. So how can you establish a meaningful pattern, not overwhelm your team, check in regularly, and try as best as possible to create this context of we're calm, we're okay, and we're making progress.
I think that's an important point, Paula, because, you know, sometimes the team members can misinterpret your care around getting them set up for the day as being over controlling.
Yeah.
So we say that it comes back to mood. Just make sure you check in on your own mood, that it is a mood of engagement and acceptance about, gee whiz, you know, things are pretty tough. So it's an engaging mood that we want to engage and interact with our team and assist them to set their day up really well.
And just before you move on, Luke right, has said you don't do a huddle at the moment, but it's something you'd like to implement from your team. Right. In a moment, we're going to share with you a huddle cheat sheet. We've got something to give away to everyone at the end of this. You pop it on your wall, and this will direct you. Everything that Tony and I are sharing is just there for you as a resource. So thanks for letting us know, and hopefully that comes in handy.
So I'm going to set up number 4 now. But before that, I'd love to know what are the disruptions that you're experiencing with your team at the moment? What are the excuses or the reasons or the what's happening that's preventing them from getting things done? Genuinely would love to know. Okay, let's go to number 4. This is around coach your team to make effective requests. You know, if you really think about it, how many requests would you and your team make on a daily basis? That is, to get things done. You know, could you please produce that report by 3 o'clock in the afternoon? You know, we're probably making many requests, but what we find is that the requests that many people make in the work we do are ill-formed. We call them a sloppy request. In other words, they're not providing all the information that we need to really help our people produce what it is that's going to satisfy us in a way that is going to produce trust. So what we say here, particularly while working from home, whether you're making requests or your team are making requests via telephone or via email, via texts, over the phone, there's important considerations here to include in those requests to ensure and to mitigate misunderstanding, misinterpretation. And so people have a sense that okay, I know exactly what you're asking me to do. Thank you. And if not, in your listening as a leader, here's the opportunity to jump in and help them frame up a better request, particularly if they're making requests across team or yourself or to people outside of the team. So here's a few tips for you. So make sure the request is spoken and it doesn't live in your head. Now, we often hear this, that leaders or people making requests make more statements than what they do requests. This is what it sounds like. Hey, that report's due Friday. Or, oh, that piece of paper's on the printer, right? Meaning, could you go and get the piece of paper from the printer, and could you have the report done to me by 3 o'clock? What we say, please be explicit in when you make a request. Could you do X for me by time Y to Z standard? Make it clear so that people know. The second point there is identify the specific task that you want taken care of. Thirdly, share the reason, provide the context. There's nothing worse than, why the heck does this person want this? Because they don't understand the context. May be very clear for you, maybe not clear for them. So nominate the precise time frame, 4 o'clock Friday afternoon, rather than sometime next week, because all of a sudden somebody else will come in with a request that has a time frame in it. Yours gets bumped because you haven't prioritized the importance of that. So that's a good one to consider. Share your standards. Make sure that you include some of the finer detail in that. If it's a report that you want or a document that you want, how long is it? Is it 3 pages? Is it 10 pages? Do you want a cover note? Do you want an executive summary? Do you want recommendations? Make sure that you become a little bit more explicit in sharing your standards. We think standards are great because they produce value. But for those of you who have got high standards, yeah, you can put that in the chat too if you like. Who's got high standards? Make sure that you articulate what it is that you want, so you're sharing your standards with others so they know. Okay, I think that's a pretty good point.
No, it's great.
So when making, what we're advocate for here too, particularly working for home, there's not the opportunity for that face-to-face. When you're making a request via email, get your team to put in the title page, action required. And that's going to draw attention to go, oh, they want me to do something, rather than embed your request into the body of a conversation via email. So we trust that that's helpful for you. If you see or hear or listen to, one of your team members ill-forming a request, there's a great opportunity for you to jump in and work with them and coach and lead them to developing a request around the structure.
So one thing that I'm tuning into there is when people are panicked, they're not making good requests. Just generally speaking, it makes sense. If you're panicked, you're moving fast, you're not thinking about stuff. So if you as a leader can coach your team in the very moment that they're making a request, you'll also have the twin benefit of calming them down somewhat. So just go slow things down and make things deliberate.
Okay. Moving on.
Okay. So securing a reliable commitment is an art form in itself. What we're saying here is there's a certain kind of way that you can make a request that engages the other human. But when they've said, yes, I'm committed to doing it, it's really helpful just to ask this one question. Is there anything likely to get in the way from you fulfilling your commitment? Because it just gives them, once again, that little 1 second of pause to go, hold on a minute. I'm picking the kids up, or no, I've got to stand in a queue at Centrelink, or no, I've got to go deal with this because my world just changed. And often, and I think it's an Australianism, I think it's an Americanism too, we get very polite and we tend to say yes and yes and yes, but we don't mean yes. So this one sentence can it stops it in its tracks. So please start doing this and see if you're starting to get more reliable commitments. And if there is a problem, you can renegotiate the delivery time there and then. But if they say, no, everything's fine, then there's another opportunity for you to say, look, if something gets in the way, please just let me know. And what that does is it just kind of firms up the commitment, and it helps you understand that someone's going to deliver on time, on spec, and to standard as best you can. Now, for you out there that have clients that are somewhat slippery with their commitments, this is a great practice. So when you're doing this, we say that this underscores trust, because what you're doing is you're moving upstream. You're not going downstream to when someone hasn't delivered. You're moving all the way up and catching it before it rolls downstream. And you know what they say, rolls downstream. So, Tony, just tuning in, there's a couple of people that are responding to us.
Oh, good. I'd like to hear what.
Yeah. So the reason I mentioned Centrelink just now, or, people have serious things going on for them at the moment that will impact their performance. Now, if they have a job at all, someone's mentioned here redundancy, a whole team of redundant people. So once again, even though we're talking about skills and practices as leader, the background to this is extreme compassion, because you never know what stopped someone delivering a commitment. And it could be news like, I don't have a job anymore. Now, something like that's really going to rock somebody's world. So as a leader, just sit back and just assess the whole range of things that could be playing out for people that are making and managing commitments with you. I think that's worthwhile just checking in on before we go to number 6.
Yeah, it is good. Okay, so keep those questions and responses coming through. We'd love to interact with you. Okay, number 6 here, our last tip is stay in a good mood. Well, what do we mean by a good mood? A good mood is a constructive mood with a good narrative about, caring and having compassion and understanding in these times. But as a leader, it's important that your mood is constructive. What we often say is that the right conversation in the wrong mood, wrong conversation, because it can disengage people and put people in not such a constructive mood for the rest of the day. So here's a few tips for you around, your own mood, and that's tuning into yourself, before the huddle, spending 5 or 10 minutes just checking in on yourself. What's going on with me? What's happening around my story? What mood do I think I'm in? How am I showing up? And if that comes up for you that, oh, gee whiz, I'm a little bit angry or resentful or, pessimistic, whatever that is, what is it that you can do in that moment to shift that for the sake of yourself and engaging in your team? Not only your team too, your family as well. So again, here we go. So tune into the story you're telling yourself before you arrive to work. Find some space for yourself and commit to shifting your story. And when you speak with your team, scan for any unhelpful moods. Start to really tune into the conversations of your team. And people will reveal themselves and their moods, particularly when you go into the check-in during your huddle. So it's a time to listen, time to tune in. And, if people aren't traveling so well or in an unconstructive mood, it's just a good time to check in and go, and ask them, hey, what's missing for you? What's happening for you here? And is it true, the story that you're telling yourself? And that can be very helpful. And again, just a reminder, the right conversation in the wrong mood is the wrong conversation. To ask people that question or be engaged in conversation in an unconstructive mood, it can turn west very quickly. So you want to be tuned in yourself and take exquisite care of yourself and take exquisite care of people, because we have no doubt that as this the conditions around the coronavirus deepens, is that perhaps people's moods are going to deepen as well. And we want to be the navigators, leaders of this era and really help our teams through this, because there is another side, the other side to this. So being present, being awake, being alive, being alert is going to be very helpful.
So I think, Tony, just to build on that, before you do your check-in in the morning, this is your job as the leader. Without fail, you should never start a check-in in an unhelpful mood, because it's contagious like a virus. I'm not making light of viruses there. I'm just saying that a mood is like a contagion, and people know straight away when you're in an unconstructive mood. And so the quality of the narrative that you have right now is going to highly influence your mood. So please tune in first thing in the morning, in the car. Look, there are many things you can do to shift your mood. One is investigate what you're telling yourself in your head. Number 2, something mood shifting, moving your body will shift your mood.
Play some music.
Play some music on the way to work.
Play your favorite
heavy metal,
tune.
however you like it. But, something to really just put yourself in a different space, because you need to show up, because you've got followers that need to show up in response to how you're showing up as a leader. So,
and Paula, in relation to moods, is that you don't even have to say anything. People get us when we're in these heavier moods as much as they get us when they're in the light moods, because it's a reverberation. We're felt and experienced in our mood. So again, tune in. Okay, we're ready to move on.
So there are six things. So in Kiwi.
That's right.
Okay.
I'm one of those.
Thank you. So
questions and concerns.
Folks, we are open for questions. We'd love to tune into what's going on in your world, the questions that you're sitting with. I see a couple of things that are going
Paula,
on
I think if we can, interact with people for about 5 minutes, and that'll give us about 5 minutes to really wrap up.
Yeah,
so.
Great. So no, I see someone's not heavy metal on the way to work. Thank you, Tanya, for that. So we've put in a little check note about not checking in an unhelpful mood. But folks, in relation to the questions that we've put forward, what are the questions you're sitting with? Because we'd love to be helpful here. And one of the things that Tony and I have really learned in engaging through Facebook is this mood of uncertainty. And what we're committing to is next week and the week after, we're going to focus our entire conversation on uncertainty. We've already come up with 10 different things or 10 different ways that we can start to work at uncertainty. We don't think we'll be through it in 2 weeks' time. We think we might be deeper into it. So please stay tuned. We'll be putting that on our Facebook feed and on our Instagram. We haven't recorded it. It's going to be done pretty much day by day.
Coming your way.
However, we feel like there's a really important support that we can offer to all of you out there that are feeling uncertain. So just noticing any questions coming through here. It might be our 30-second delay, but folks, don't be shy. We like working on the fly because most of the time we're engaged with humans face to face, right? And it's always live. So if there's something that's happening for you out there, please tune in, ask your questions. If not, I think that we will jump to a question that might be likely for anyone that we can tune into. So Tony, something present for you?
Well, there probably is, and it's around the question of uncertainty, and you know, and it's difficult to define. But what's the body sensation for you around uncertainty? You know, like what happens for you? Do you feel tight? What's your breathing pattern? How do you experience yourself in anxiety? Because some people can't actually attribute or label anxiety. It could come across as something else. And anxiety is it's a way of being. It's a response to something that we fear. So maybe that's the question. What is it that we're actually fearing in these times? If we go down to that next level question, what is it that we're fearing? What do we fear?
So we're going to do some work on body next week and what we experience physiologically in response to a new stream coming our way. I'm going to do some body work on that. So that's certainly something that we'll work on a little bit further. But in the meantime, here we go. Tanya, thank you so much. There's 2 Tanyas, by the way, just in case you think I'm obsessed with one Tanya. There's a couple of you out there. The concern that I'm hearing is clients not being engaged because they have other priorities, but you could help them. How could you turn this around? So we're going to talk about a powerful offer now. And Tanya, the question is, what's stopping you from being in the conversation with them in the way that you would like to be? Because inside your question, I actually hear care. I don't hear, sometimes we have a concern when we go and make an offer to someone that we're going to come across a certain way, or, we're being a bit of a big note of ourselves. But in fact, I'm hearing behind that your motive is good, just the way that you've written the question. So what's stopping you making that beautiful offer in the spirit with which you've written it here as a question, because it sounds like you can be helpful. And also, instead of starting with the offer, it might be good to start that conversation by really tuning into their world and asking them a few questions so that you can position that offer in a way that lands, so you match their concerns that they share with you with the thing that you'd like to offer them. So I'm not sure if that's helpful.
There's probably something else there too, Paula, in addition to that is, Tanya, ask yourself, what story do you have about the person that, it might be preoccupied or have something else going on? What story do you have about that might be limiting your capacity to interact? So it starts with you, it's not all about you, but it starts with you. And if you think about that, the pessimist and the optimist, structure, not those moods, but what's happening in your story, what's happening in your moods, and what's happening physically, and what could you shift to be able to more powerfully interact with that person, could be really helpful and could be a worthy exploration as well. Yeah.
And I have one more question. We have time for one more.
Okay, before we move on.
Thank you, Emily. I'm not sure if I should say Emily Jane, but that's what's here on screen. What happens when a team doesn't want to engage in these sort of huddles or check-ins, or they're not interested? You're welcome, Tanya. So if they're not interested, so here's the deal.
Here's the deal.
If you are employed by an organization, you're not going there solely to have your personal needs met. You have an obligation. As a leader, it's really helpful to be able to use that as a way to say, hey, we've got an obligation as a team to perform X for the company. I'd like to establish a half an hour time at some time that serves us in the day, even if that's 10 o'clock if you've got late sleepers and late starters, which often businesses do. What would you like to put into this half an hour that would be meaningful for you? So that you're not the dictator. You're the person saying, we've got something to do, but why don't you help me craft it? Because once you start to do that, they're owning the creation with you rather than you coming in and saying, this is how we do it. The other thing is that Tony and I have an obsession. I'm going to say it. We have an obsession with the agreements of a team.
It's an obsession.
Teams come together with a shared vision, mission. Ideally, values sit below that, but there are agreements, commitments and behaviors that all teams operate by. And when you can agree to these, your team will hum. So there might be something else we can do next week in terms of a piece of content that will help you with that. So stand by. If you can't see my wall, it is full of all of our content ideas and that's going on there. So thanks, Emily Jane. Hopefully that was helpful.
Yeah, getting your team set up well could be a really good consideration about working from home.
Yeah. So if we could move to the next slide, Tony.
Okay, here's a little quote that we put together. Reinventing ourselves starts with our declaration to observe ourselves and the world differently, and this requires us to become great learners. We say that leaders are great learners, and this time, if there's ever an opportunity for us to cultivate being different with our team, and that starts with us, is declaring ourselves a learner, because we're not going to know what's going to happen tomorrow. We're not going to know what mood people are going to show up in. So, but when we have a propensity to know, we automatically close ourselves off to learning. So being in that beginner's mind, being open to learning and to open to the experience can be very rich for us in these times. In fact, the more we know in these times, the less it's actually going to serve us, because really, what is it that we know outside of our technical professional domain about what's going on? Probably about that. Why? Because the norms are changing all the time at the moment. Yeah. Right. Okay, let's move on.
So folks, we're heading into the close of our session. Thank you so much. We've still got a lot of you online. I can see how many, it changes, but we've held our group together. So well done. So we'd like to share a resource with you as a gratitude for you coming along today, and also as a resource for you to be able to hold these amazing morning check-ins. It really does cover the tips and advice that Tony and I have been able to share today, but it's a desktop resource, so you can just print it out. Luke, this is for you. Print it out, put it next to your desk, and you can run using this. I'm just going to post it in the chat now.
And while Paul is doing that, there's nothing like establishing or setting up rituals and habits for your team in these difficult times, something that's repetitive in nature, because it's all about the conversations with your team in these times. So the ritual that we have every morning, it's a huddle, we check in with each other through the day, is that we actually look forward to that as an opportunity to connect.
So folks, that is now in the chat box. I can see, thank you, Melinda, for your support. It's come up as a downloadable. When you click on that, you'll be taken to a page where you just leave your name and email, and we'll send that to you automatically. It's an automatic process. And thank you to Stan for helping us set that up.
With gratitude.
So if we move to our final slide, look, Tony and I have had to be great learners, I would say, for our whole lives. But right now, in the last 4 weeks, our business is face-to-face. It is what we do. We work with leaders in their teams to help them be amazing. Now, can you imagine that there is no business right now? We have to migrate, and we were already in the process of migrating, but that has now accelerated in this time of coronavirus. We run a one-day program called the Accelerator Program. It normally goes from 8 in the morning till 5 in the night. And what we're doing is we're shifting it from face-to-face, where we did actually give you a good lunch, so I'm afraid that is off now,
virtual,
to 4 sessions over 4 weeks to work in with your schedules. So we're going to talk about how to build trust, how to identify where trust is broken, how to construct a conversation around trust, how to listen differently as a leader, because when we listen differently, we language differently, we feel differently, and we're more effective as a leader. And how to make,
how to make powerful requests. We've given you just a little bit about the request making skill, but we go right into the skill of making a request and how to show up and how to secure that reliable commitment. And then fourth, the last skill that we build is coaching to capability. And what we mean by that is that when things go wrong, we want to engage ourselves as a leader coach. So it's asking great questions and really getting the other person to engage in the conversation and get them to solve their own problems. So if you're the knowledge hub and they all come to you, maybe this is the opportunity to swing that around.
So folks, I just posted something in the chat box and I would like to declare myself, I've made a mistake in the slide deck, everybody. It's live 15 is the coupon code rather than live 25. So I've just posted the link to our online learning. Thank you, Chris Jordan. I love that you're such a Hawkeye. He said, live 25, why is it 15? You want 25%. I know you, Chris Jordan. So Chris, you've covered some of these concepts, but we would love to have you back, of course. Live 15, I've put it inside alongside the link. We would love to have you along. There's a 15% discount if you book before tomorrow, 5:30 this time tomorrow. So you've got 24 hours to get in the door. This program's normally $585 face-to-face. It's $250 online, less 15%. So you do the maths, but it's a total bargain. We don't want to be opportunistic in this time. We want to be of service. But if we can help you build those skills, that is the greatest way that we can be of service. So folks, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for coming along to our very first live. If anyone wants to know how to do this, we could probably coach you through it. But if anyone else is also struggling and just wants to have a conversation, this is our work, conversing with leaders to be able to be more effective and navigate disruption. So we'd love to converse with you. Please follow us on our socials at Liberated Leaders on Instagram. Obviously, you know the Facebook, Liberated Leaders on LinkedIn as well. So thank you so much. Wonderful to be with you.
Yeah, and just a closing note, take care, be well, keep safe, keep healthy, and stay tuned. Bye.
Bye.